The Scandinavian peninsula is about to become just a memory of our trip around the world. We spent a few days wandering around Finland. We saw its medieval castles, where you can climb the walls for a view of the land of 1,000 lakes. Then we continued south to Helsinki, a city on the shore of the Baltic Sea. St. Petersburg is our entry point to Russia, the biggest country on the planet. Dan will get on the Trans-Siberian Express, and I will accompany Jose Luis to film the roads of Siberia. We will meet up later before traveling to an island on the legendary Lake Baikal. There we will begin a new route, which will take us to the remotest corner of Mongolia. We will travel a total of more than 6,000 miles in search of the last nomads of the continent. Crossing the Gobi Desert is quite a challenge, and challenges can cost us dear. Episode 2, Nomads of the Steppes. Stendhal syndrome is a condition causing palpitations, dizziness, and confusion when a person is exposed to an overdose of artistic beauty. Well, when we got to St. Petersburg, we thought we might be coming down with it. The city is a result of a crazy idea. In 1703, Tsar Peter the Great began building the new capital of his empire. He wanted access to the sea, and while he was at it, the admiration of the whole world. The Tsar commissioned architects from Germany and the Netherlands to build streets and monuments. He took inspiration from Versailles for the design of the Winter Palace and took Venice as the model for the canals. But some of his churches bear the unmistakable stamp of Russian Orthodoxy, with their highly decorated facades and their curving shapes. Today, the legacy of the era of the Tsars allows its inhabitants to stroll around one of the most beautiful cities in Europe. But this is not always a peaceful place.
Acabamos de salir para recoger el coche y lo que nos hemos encontrado ha sido la sorpresa desagradable de un nuevo robo. Parece que han tenido acceso también al maletero y eso que está bien sellado, pero
me han arrancado las patas.
Solamente se han llevado la radio, lo cual no deja de ser un alivio porque teníamos de todo aquí.
As soon as we could fix the damage, we got back on the road. Although this time we'll travel without music. And this time we're going to the biggest city in Europe. While St. Petersburg reflects the enormous ambition of the Tsars, Moscow is literally enormous. The Kremlin is more than a mile around, and Red Square, at over 1,000 feet long, is one of the biggest in the world. The city has the largest area of any in Europe and is also the largest in population, with more than 10 million inhabitants. Moscow is a living city and growing all the time, but there is also room for those who miss the Soviet era. Next to the walls of Red Square, people set up stalls selling old newspapers from the 70s, emblems of Che Guevara, and other relics which are no longer part of Russian reality. The old symbols of communism resist the passing of time. But Moscow's population is, above all, a young population. And nowadays, no one wants to hear patriotic hymns when they can spend the night listening to disco. We intend to leave Moscow as soon as possible because, of all the rankings it tops, there is one we don't like at all. It's one of the most expensive cities in the world. A long journey awaits us, but this time Dan won't be with us, although he doesn't seem too worried about that. In the station, it's easy to find passengers packing their lives up and striking out for a new town. Moscow is the starting point of the Trans-Siberian Express, which runs from the capital to the city of Vladivostok, 5,753 miles away. Although Dan, for now, will only travel half of that.
Este billete es el que nos va a abrir las puertas a una de las grandes aventuras que se pueden realizar en el planeta, como es la de recorrer 4.500 kilómetros en el Transiberiano. Estamos en la estación moscovita de Yaroslavsky. Desde aquí nos vamos directos a Siberia.
El Transiberiano es solo una manera de cruzar Rusia, pero con un coche como este vamos a demostrar que se puede también hacer por carretera.
Jose Luis and I will take turns driving day and night. That is, when we get out of Moscow. It takes several hours to get through the city. And of course, we will spend many days crossing Russia. We drive the first 500 miles non-stop. And that brings us to Kazan, a place which has grown up in the shadow of the great cities of Western Russia. We are gradually getting closer to Asian territory. When we cross the Urals, the temperatures drop and complications ensue.
Bueno, pues hemos cambiado la rueda. Solo falta recoger las herramientas y tirar millas.
But if you're traveling into Siberia with winter just round the corner, things can only get worse. Meanwhile, on the train, Dan is witness to a scene which will be repeated at every station. The goodbyes of people setting off for the easternmost part of Russia, nearly on the other side of the world. Some are going home after visiting the big city. Others are going to Siberia for military reasons. And there are some who treat the journey like a holiday.
Please.
Spania, привет.
Dan is traveling alone, so he will have to record himself. To the other travelers, it looks like he's talking to himself.
Aquí empieza la aventura que nos va a llevar del uno al otro extremo de Rusia, el país más grande del mundo. Son más de 16 vagones los que componen este transiberiano, aquí llamado Moscú-Vladivostok. Y creo que este es mi compartimento, así que me preparo para pasar mi primera noche.
And this is where we find the camera recording by itself. Yes, we might have to hire someone else. We only have time to drive. And we have to deal with the traffic jams of another enormous city.
Bueno, pues con nuestro GPS particular a ver si nos orientamos en la ciudad de Yekaterinburgo. Es una ciudad grande, es la tercera ciudad más importante de Rusia después de San Petersburgo y de Moscú, que es la primera. Parece una, 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 la pantalla, la publicidad a tope. Vamos a ir a la iglesia de la sangre, donde mataron a esta gente y así la vemos. Ya que estamos en el camino.
This church was built to commemorate a regicide. Tsar Nicholas II and all his family were assassinated here. Today, Russians come to this church and light candles to honor the memory of the Tsars, or to pray for a warmer winter. I'm not sure. Since entering Russia, we have seen a lot of monuments to the fallen, eternal flames for the war dead, statues invoking their heroes, and shrines keeping the memory of the governors alive. The history of this country from one end of the territory to the next seems to resist being forgotten. We don't know what we will find in Siberia, but it's just that uncertainty that makes a journey into an adventure. From here on, we have to improvise. Here it's easy to find fruit stalls and eat for a few rubles next to the road.
Испанцы, да? Испанцы.
España. España, Finlandia, Finland, Rusia, Mongolia.
We are gradually entering deepest Russia. We want to get on before there's snow and ice on the road. For Dan, it's much easier. His only problem is language. This means a lot of incomprehensible conversations.
Muéveme, no importa, dale, dale, que ya pago. Saluda, saluda, ya conmigo. Este es uno de los compañeros del viaje, ¿verdad? Dice, привет. You have many kilometers.
7000 километров.
¿Cuántos?
7.
Сколько? Sergei. Привет.
Тебя как звать?
Lo mismo te digo. Daniel.
Данил?
Sí, Daniel.
Ну, все,
Okay.
The train has a total of 14 stops. And at each one, a market appears for 20 minutes. This time there is a meeting of two giants. The Trans-Siberian and the Trans-Mongolian are face to face. Warm clothes are the most popular product, because from here on there is only winter. We are traveling without a radio, and our only accommodation is this car hotel, taking us through Russia. If Siberia were an independent state, it would be by far the biggest in the world. But only 40 million people live here. We have to use chains in the snow. The problem at this time of year is you have to use chains in some areas and then take them off again. And so on for thousands of miles. Although some people are worse off than us. The ice makes everything more difficult.
Сейчас, подожди, братан, еще деранешь меня, я заведу. Аккумулятор посадил.
After several attempts, we manage what seemed impossible, and we can both go on our way. On the train, everything is easier. The kitchen staff know they have to prepare meals for about 450 passengers for a week.
Enfilamos la recta final de nuestro camino hacia Siberia y lo hacemos desde la cafetería restaurante del Transiberiano. Spasiba, Alicia. Alicia me trae el borsch, que es la comida típica, una sopa caliente que reconforta cuando uno tiene que mirar por la ventanilla del tren y ve solamente la taiga y la nieve en el camino. No te rías, Tania, que se te oye.
The dawn finds us in the northern woods. filming these images, I wonder what would happen if we had a breakdown right now. We cheer ourselves up thinking that sooner or later there are always villages along the road.
Bueno, ya dejamos atrás la ciudad de Kansk. Hace un frío terrible. Estamos cruzando un pueblecito pequeño de Siberia y por suerte estamos ya llegando a la ciudad de Irkutsk.
If you want to shoot a scene at 12 below zero, it's best to hurry. The weather has gone crazy right now when we're so close to the end.
Aquí termina mi aventura en el Transiberiano, pero el tren continúa hasta la ciudad de Vladivostok. Nosotros nos hemos detenido en la que llaman la perla de Rusia, que es el lago Baikal, y a sus orillas vamos a conocer la ciudad de Irkutsk.
The next morning, the snow reminds Dan that he is now in the heart of Siberia, although its inhabitants have learned to live with the cold.
El clima de Siberia puede cambiar rápidamente y hoy nos hemos despertado con lo que es el paisaje habitual de esta parte de Rusia, que es la nieve. De todas formas, eso no impide a sus habitantes una actividad frenética por las calles y hacer lo que más les gusta, que es ir de compras.
In fact, you can find practically anything in the squares of Irkutsk. Some sell fur coats and boots for the snow. You can even find pets, which have also learned to adapt to the winter. In the street markets, you have to admit that the products are particularly fresh. But overnight, the weather calms down and the snow disappears. This means Dan can stroll around an attractive city. In the time of the Tsars, this city was full of theatres and palaces. Even the poorer neighbourhoods still have the charm of their carved wooden houses. It's as if Irkutsk was full of artistic carpenters. In this part of the world you can see Orthodox churches, although the camels of the steppes live close by. Here you can still find Russian military marches, but we're beginning to see more Oriental faces. And we have travelled 3,300 miles to get here. We're all together again, and from Irkutsk we begin a new route. Let's see where we've been. We left St. Petersburg 3 weeks ago, and from Moscow our routes ran parallel. Dan was on board the Trans-Siberian. Meanwhile, José Luis and I crossed Russia by road to get to Irkutsk. And now we are going to see the largest body of fresh water on the planet, Lake Baikal. We've just disembarked on the island of Olkhon, the biggest on the lake. Its main town is Kozir. We wanted to show remote places on our travels, and this place certainly fits the bill. Although there are roads, it's easy to get around the island on tracks and dirt roads. The landscape changes completely from one place to another. First we were on the edge of cliffs, going up treeless hills. Then we go into forests with the only conifers in the world which shed their needles in winter. Framing the landscapes of Lake Baikal, I can be certain I'm filming an unusual place. The beaches are deserted. No one is here to disturb the peace of this coast. Well, we disturbed it a little. But it's hard not to get swept up by the feeling of freedom. Many have seen the lake as a mystical, spiritual place. colored cloth decorates the trees of Baikal. These are ancient shamanic symbols which have been absorbed into the Buddhist tradition, which also took root on the island of Olhon. Some say the strips of cloth are offerings which protect against evil spirits. Others say they help dreams come true. Myths and superstitions have always been part of Lake Baikal. This is the deepest lake in the world. A diver would have to descend 5,380 feet to reach the bottom. This is a fifth of the planet's fresh water. And hardly anyone is here to feel the magic of the landscape. Sergei has kindly offered to accompany us. He lives in the town of Kozir, and he's taking us to one of the most distant parts of Olhon, on an island hidden on a remote lake in the forgotten region of Siberia. Not bad for a picnic.
Sergei, what kind of fish is this?
It's the best fish of the world. It's the most delicious that we can find here, only here in Lake Baikal.
And
it's
what's
called
the name?
omul.
Omul.
You just put the best part from the back of the fish and taste it. Really delicious, huh?
Really delicious.
You're privileged people, those who come here, because you can still taste this very rare, endemic, it's called, endemical fish.
Mm-hmm.
It's found really only in the Lake Baikal.
This place was discovered by the Russians just 4 centuries ago, and mass tourism has not yet arrived. However, some travelers leave their mark when they reach the northern end of Olhon.
Sergei, what's the meaning of this object?
If you leave a personal object that belongs to you on this very place, either by attaching it to the column or here on the ground, it will mean that you will certainly come back here in the future.
From here, we can only turn back. Several concentration camps once stood on the island, where prisoners were sent in the Soviet era. Even today, life is slow here. But that doesn't mean the people of Kozir don't have fun. Even in the most remote villages of Russia, it's easy to feel at home. The time has come to change direction completely. We are going to a place that has nothing to do with what we have seen until now. Before getting 30 miles into Mongolia, we realize we're driving through a new landscape. Imagine one day leaving your country. You drive, and suddenly you're in front of a camel train. Well, that's the moment you realize just how far you are from home. From now on, we'll have to get used to the leisurely gait of the camels, the endless steps, and the occasional encounter with human beings, because that is going to define the route in the least densely populated country in the world. Many families make a living from salt in the north of the country. The work is there for young and old. But how people dress is beginning to show us the difference between traditions and imported fashions. When we get to the town of Darhan, we see that something similar has happened with religion. The former Soviet Union had a great deal of influence on Mongolia in the second half of the 20th century. However, in the holy places, we see that Buddhism survived the communist era. Many temples were destroyed and images of Buddha were censored. But the country has seen its symbols reborn. Every evening, the people of Darhan climb to the top of this hill to pray. The meditation exercises are linked to the figure of the circle, universal symbol of perfection. And so they walk around the stupas, surround the figure of Buddha, or turn their prayer wheels for purification. It's clear we have reached a different place. The capital of Mongolia plunges us back into the tumult of big cities. Ulaanbaatar is the industrial and economic center and home to the only traffic jams we'll see in this country. The statistics also place it among the most populated capitals in the world. Many herders come to the city to improve their quality of life, and that produces an inevitable culture clash. Although we have already seen it, Ulaanbaatar shows how the past and future of the country live cheek by jowl. But there is also a space here which is timeless. In the Gandan district, we run straight into the Buddhist culture which has survived in Mongolia. Today, there are nearly 1,000 monks living in a place which was practically destroyed by the Soviet government. The communist regime tore down some 900 monasteries throughout the country. However, Gandan today is a Buddhist landmark, not only for the monks. Many of the young people we see here have come from other parts of the continent. Some are just children, but are already preparing to become monks one day. The temple of Janrasing occupies the center of Gandan. Inside we see one of the most venerated images of Mongolia. The image of the Buddha is 85 feet tall and is covered in gold. This is a place conceived for achieving nirvana. But now we're here, we prefer to seek spiritual peace in the southern landscapes. There are hardly any highways in a country bigger than Texas, with a population of Houston. Now we want to follow the trail of the southern nomads, one of the oldest living cultures in Asia. As long as we find little villages, we can get something to eat. Some have organized satellite TV reception. Everything else is fairly austere. The women prepare us something to eat, although the only fuel for the fire is dried animal dung. The nomads are generous to travelers and offer us some vodka to celebrate the meeting. We've already fallen in love with Mongolia. The highways disappear, and from here on, we will see hardly any vehicles. There are no more signposts, and we need a local guide to show us the way. There are no more hotels or hostels along the road either, mainly because there are no roads. If we don't want to sleep in the car, we will have to ask the nomad families for accommodation. Sometimes we're lucky, other times we aren't. This time we're heading to a hilly area. In the shelter of the mountains, we find some yurts, or gers as they're called in Mongolia.
Esta familia de nómadas acaba de instalar aquí su campamento de invierno. Llevan su casa a cuestas, este ger, que consiste en una estructura de madera recubierta por una capa aislante de fieltro que les protege de las bajas temperaturas.
This is a house which can be dismantled. And in an almost uninhabited country, you can live wherever you please. It's about 200 square feet with a central fireplace, and the roof is supported by more than 100 wooden roof poles. The layer of compressed wool is essential in winter camps. Temperatures inside the home can reach 10 or 12 degrees below zero once the fire goes out. Nomad families form a society in themselves, where everyone joins in to put up the ger, which is ready in half an hour. Gers are usually isolated in the middle of the steppes. But inside they certainly look like home. Tapestries decorate the walls, and some furniture is decorated with religious symbols and photos of relatives, just like any other family in the world. There isn't any electricity, but they have an old TV, just in case prosperity comes knocking. They will spend months in these mountains. And when the pastures run out, the family will have to move. Again. The life of nomad herders has never been easy. Since leaving Ulaanbaatar, we've traveled from ger to ger. But now we're going to reach a town with more people. At last, a settlement. We don't notice anything special as we approach the small town of Karkorin. It's a simple settlement with humble neighborhoods and small markets. Here, many people prefer gers to conventional houses, even though they don't intend to move. The men play pool compulsively. It seems to be a craze among the young people. This is how afternoons go by on the Mongolian steppes, in a quiet, forgotten town like so many others. However, Karkorin is not just another town. It was once known as Karakorum. That means we are in the capital of the greatest empire the world has ever seen. Today, only a monolith on top of a mound remains to remind us. The territories of Genghis Khan once extended from Istanbul to the Chinese border. 800 years ago, this place was the center of the world. Over time, the empire became decadent and the capital fell into ruin. Many of the stones of the old city of Karakorum were used to build Erdenizu, the largest monastery in Mongolia. The temple has been destroyed and rebuilt several times. Maybe this is Mongolia's destiny too, to be born again and again from its ashes. Meanwhile, anyone looking for a spiritual retreat will not find a more isolated place than the Buddhist monastery of Erdenizu. Here, the home of forgetting, next to the last descendants of Genghis Khan. We continue southwards at a leisurely pace, crossing rivers which are beginning to freeze. Herds of horses are the only companions for a journey towards nothing. Or, to put it another way, the Gobi Desert. It's unwise to drive at night here, but fortunately we find another family of herders. At dawn, another day begins with the nomads. The sun rises quickly for the inhabitants of the desert. Ducherold has spent all his life traveling from one place to another in Mongolia. But the future of the family lies with the young people. And here the men must learn quickly.
Dicen que los jinetes de Mongolia son los mejores de todo el mundo. De hecho, heredaron la habilidad de los antiguos soldados de Genghis Khan. Y estando en las estepas de este país, creo que es el mejor lugar para poder aprender a montar uno de estos caballos. Lo voy a hacer gracias a un gran profesor, se llama Sumin Ba. Tiene tan solo 16 años, pero desde que tenía 3 ya subía a lomos de uno de estos animales, lo cual le convierte en todo un experto.
The soldiers who once conquered the world are now herders, but they are still great horsemen. The Mongols ride without saddles, and as Dan can confirm, this is not at all comfortable. However, they don't have the same problems. Ducherold has welcomed us as cordially as other herders, without stopping to wonder why he should share his house with some foreigners.
I was sleeping here today, last night, and for me it was really frozen time, frozen cold, and I think it's going to be much colder in the future. How can you resist that?
Бид нар орчин ийсэн дараагүй шүү дээ. Ингээд яриад ингээд унцыг халуун дуулаахан байсан. Та нар даасаа. Ийм дуулааханд яаж явна?
Next time I come here in winter, but you please close the window and put extra fire in the gear. Okay?
Yeah.
What do you think about the Gobi? The Gobi is getting bigger, and maybe Mongolia is getting a big desert. Are you worried about it?
Ховор орж байна. Ус шал дэгшэр гэж байна. Газар их хатаж байна. Ган их болж байна. Малайчход их хорлолтой цаг ирэх нь. Монгол орны малайчхой тариаланд.
It's bad time for animals. Maybe it's bad time for nomads too. Well, tell me about the future of the nomads, please.
Малчид одоо энэ хил эвгүй нөлөөлөх гэдэг юм даа ерөөсөө. Нар их гарч байгаа. Ган их болж байгаа бороо ховордог. Энэ дэлхий азууны цаарх томснаас болж ийм болж байна гэж үдээд байгаа шүү дээ ерөөсөө.
Despite the harsh climate, the nomads have no frontiers, and their lands are as far as they can see. There are still camel herders by the red cliffs. There are still signs of men on an endless plain. And today, we too can look out onto this desolate, lovely land. Today, we feel free, like them. Although this freedom ends at the service stations, there aren't many out here, and to tell the truth, I wouldn't like to run out of fuel in the middle of the desert. In a small town to the south, José Luis organizes what we need to continue on our way. After 3 months' travel, the ritual of loading and unloading has become a necessary routine.
Han congelado las botellas de agua. Algunas se han reventado, han mojado todas las cajas de los filtros. Un disco de embrague ahí pegado y...
We must reload the equipment and service the car. But what José Luis doesn't know is that this time it won't do any good. The Gobi Desert can be a treacherous place. For many, it's the end of the road. And it may be for us too. A goat in the road, a swerve, and it looks like the journey may suddenly be over. José Luis has broken his collarbone. Thanks to some nomads, we were able to reach a village 80 miles from there. But for now, our photographer can't accompany us. We will have to take him to Dalan Sagat, where he can catch a plane to Ulaanbaatar and a hospital. Now we realize how lucky we've been. José Luis's injury could have been much worse, and the nomads who rescued us might not have been there. And then, best not to think about it.
Straight! Okay. Very slow. Very slow and very straight.
It's time to take care of the car, or what's left of it.
Stop!
The first step is to take it to the capital. The only available lorry is smaller than the car, but it's all we have.
It's very short. This is too heavy. We have 2 wheels here.
We have paid the driver to take the car to Ulaanbaatar. We don't know what will happen next. Very near Dalan Sagat, we discover that there is something which has changed the way of life for some Mongols. Under the sand, these men are looking for gold. This is a clandestine activity, but there are herders who see an alternative to their herds. The fact that Mongolia has gold reserves in the steppes can mean 2 things. That its inhabitants can improve their quality of life, or that they kill off a 1,000-year-old culture. To thank one of the families who helped us after the accident, we have decided to buy a goat from them and share it with them. Of course, we'll leave the cooking to the experts. This is a special occasion which allows them to eat fresh meat. Outdoors, they have already prepared a fire, and several stones are being heated to use for roasting the meat. Now we just have to wait for the fire to do its thing. The goat will feed at least 10 to 12 people. And also the stones warm our hands up.
Es bueno para la salud. This is healthy. This is healthy. Yeah.
By now, José Luis will be in Ulaanbaatar, and it cheers us up to know he'll be in good hands. Our problems have piled up, and we don't know if the damage to the car will be, in a word, terminal. But now the best thing to do is to enjoy the dinner and think only about the journey that awaits us to the dunes of the Gobi. Because whatever vehicle we use, we are determined to see it through. Going through Mongolia means getting up early every day. For days, we have been living among herds of goats, getting up at dawn. And honestly, it isn't always easy. But it's always worth it. We have crossed mountainous areas, steppes, and even drier landscapes. After the accident, we took a detour to take José Luis to Dharamsagat. And we have gone on non-stop to the heart of the Gobi Desert. It's strange. Even here we feel welcome. Here, the last herders in the country live. The most daring nomads of Mongolia. Because beyond here, there is no place for the herds or for man. The dunes joining Mongolia to China begin here. Temperatures drop to 42 degrees below zero in winter and rise to 45 above in summer. Everything is destroyed by drought. Only a few species of birds cross this land in search of water. The first sensation a traveller gets here is one of being overwhelmed. The dunes with their shadows look like a giant sundial. And here are children growing up who have to play with horse legs, as there aren't many toys here. The arrival of some strangers is quite a novelty. This little girl seems just as curious as Dan.
¡Qué guapa!
Here, no one hurries. It's as if time has stopped under the spell of the peacefulness of these people. Man can get used to anything. The first thing I think about when filming these scenes is how difficult it must be to bring up children in a place like this. But their mother does everything so naturally that she makes this life look like a good alternative to the city. And today there is something special on the menu: pasta with camel meat. All you need is a board and a little flour and a lot of patience. This gastronomic ritual can take several hours. Usually the food for lunch will also be eaten for dinner. The woman does the cooking and the man selects the camel to be slaughtered.
Okay.
After many days, at last we can enjoy a meal that doesn't include goat.
Está buenísima. Carne de primera, Ana. Debería montar un restaurante. Restaurant. You. In Spain. Que no tenemos carne de camello, que ahí triunfas.
Before going back to Ulaanbaatar, we prepare for the last journey. It's difficult to find a place so far away from the concept of a city, but whoever arrives here has the opportunity to walk along the crest of the dunes. The deserts have the virtue of silence, and in silence you can see everything better. Also, you can get a little Lawrence of Arabia and see it from a very special point of view. Camels are the noblest animals of the desert. They can resist the harshest climates and don't complain about drought or cold, like their herders. For us, the experience is exotic, even fun. It's fascinating to get on a camel and ride around the dunes. But the nomads see reality quite differently.
Why are you living here in the Gobi?
Would
Would you like to change? Because this is a very hard place to live sometimes. Why is this place so special for you? Are you more free than me?
In Mongolia, there are fewer than 1 million nomad herders. They have resisted political change, wars, conquest, and tourism. This is why they are still free spirits, in a place without frontiers, where the desert and the steppes are simply their home.